Hi, this is Jeff Blauette, Technical Agronomist with Cooperative Farmers Elevator. And on this week's Field Friday segment, kind of wanted to talk about a little bit of an issue we may have coming up here with this hot and dry weather pattern we're in. We're out in a cornfield here today, but I think it's something that we could be concerned about in corn and beans, but it's the two-spotted spider mite. The spider mites, you know, we've had in the past occasionally. They typically are only a factor when we get hot and dry weather, so obviously the last couple of years we haven't really seen any issues with them, but we're starting to see some show up now. You're out in the lower part of the canopy on corn. There's probably a few out in beans as well. I haven't spotted any in beans yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if there is some. But with this advanced forecast, you know, we're back in the 90s again. We keep missing these rains. I think we probably have an environment set up to have some issues with them, or at least something to keep an eye on. The spider mites, like I say, can be a factor in corn and soybeans. We're spraying a lot of these fields now with fungicides and, you know, some micronutrients and whatnot with an airplane. Hopefully we have insecticides with those that are effective on them, so if there is a beginning population, we can maybe keep them in check for a little bit yet, but we need to understand a little bit about the spider mite. Spider mites typically are only a problem in hot, dry weather, mainly because there's a fungal pathogen that Mother Nature kind of keeps them in check on her own, and that, you know, we can almost always find a small amount of spider mites in a canopy, but they never really do anything because of that. There's also some predatory insects that kind of keep them in check, somewhat more of a normal weather environment. But when we get into this hot and dry, the predatory insects don't proliferate very well, so they go down in population. The disease that controls them or keeps them in check also starts to decrease. So we have an environment where the nature's control mechanisms, you might say, are decreasing, and the spider mite population can flare up and grow really rapidly in a drought condition. They typically work on the bottom of the plant and work their way up on feeding, mainly because those bottom leaves start out when they start to slough off on corn, or on beans when they start to turn yellow and dry up. That's kind of more of a simulated drought condition on those leaflets. So those spider mites, kind of like that. But if their population expands and we continue to stay dry, you see some of these fields already, you'll start to see a little bit of corn starting to roll up in the afternoons. That's an indication we're in a situation where they could start to really be a factor. A couple of things we need to be aware of when spraying these fields. If we do see spider mites, we need to make sure we're using the proper insecticides, because not a lot of insecticides are very effective on them. Actually, spider mites are not an actual insect, they're actually an arachnid. That's, you know, similar to a spider, hence the name. But we have to make sure that the insecticide we're using has activity on them, because we're out there probably going to kill most of the predatory insects as well. So if we do that with the wrong insecticide, we can cause what's called a spider mite flare up, and that has happened using the insecticides that don't have the activity on them. So we need to be aware of that when we are spraying fungicides, or if we're, you know, spraying an insecticide later for some other things if we have to do so. But basically, they're the most miserable insect you'll ever see to scout for. And 2012 was the last time we really had a lot of issues with them, but we all remember how dry and hot 2012 was. We're kind of edging up towards that now with the moisture condition we're in. So that's kind of why I wanted to bring it to our attention here. Hopefully we get some rain in the next week or two, and that might, you know, kind of help keep things in check, but we need to be watching. If you start seeing a canopy that's starting to really rapidly go backwards, I wouldn't be surprised it's more than just lack of moisture. It could be spider mites sucking the sap out of those leaves. They don't chew on anything, they suck saps. They're a sucking insect. They're really, really, really tiny. I have a picture here of a corn leaf from the bottom of the plant that has a population of spider mites on it, and I can't even show you on the picture where the insects are. They're that tiny, but you can kind of see the damage that they do to the leaf. Soybeans, kind of the same thing. On the bottom of a soybean leaf, there's some discoloration. They almost kind of get like a stippling, they call it, almost like a wrinkle, discolored wrinkling effect. So those are kind of the damage visuals to look for. The other thing would be is if you're out into a cornfield and you kind of come out and you're all itchy and your eyes are really itchy and you kind of are watery, that's probably a bunch of those little critters in your eyes. I know they're, like I say, they're the most miserable thing to scout for, but we need to be aware of it because in this droughty weather, that corn doesn't need any more stress and the beans don't either. They're trying to produce yield today, and if they start to be a factor, they can be worth treating. So just wanted to make you aware of something this weather pattern kind of makes me concerned about. Best way is probably talk to your CFE agronomist and see if we're starting to deal with them in areas, and just be aware that they're a little bit more difficult to deal with and to control. So with that, that's this week's Field Friday segment, and we'll see you next week.